You're not overthinking. You're trapped. There is a quiet accusation that haunts many lives. You think too much. It slides in as a whisper. Just stop overthinking. Go with the flow. You're in your head again. The message wounds. Your pain is your fault. If only you could silence the storm inside, your life would make sense. But what if that accusation is wrong? What if what you call overthinking is not a personal flaw, but the ache of something deeper? Structural, psychological, something you never chose or invited, but now carries you from one anxious night to the next. What if you're not overthinking at all? What if you're trapped, lost in a maze your mind cannot escape, pacing the same haunted halls again and again? The illusion of too much thinking. The phrase overthinking suggests excess. It implies there is a correct amount of thinking. You have crossed some invisible, dysfunctional boundary. But this framing is misleading. Thinking itself is not the problem. Thought is not a faucet you can simply turn off when it becomes inconvenient. When your mind loops, replays, anticipates, and dissects, it is not malfunctioning. It is trying to solve something. The question is not why think so much, but what problem is your mind trying and failing to resolve? This is where the idea of overthinking shatters. What appears as excess is often painful repetition. This isn't evidence of too much thought, but of a wound left open. Your mind returns, not to torment, but because it aches for a resolution, circling like a desperate bird around an invisible cage. You are not just thinking too much. You are thinking in circles. The architecture of the trap. To understand this trap, look beneath conscious thought. What drives your thinking is often hidden. The mind is layered. Beneath deliberate reasoning lie assumptions, fears, and internalized beliefs. Carl Jung described the unconscious as a hidden layer, a domain of unresolved conflicts, suppressed desires, and disowned parts of the self. Jung said what we refuse to face does not disappear. Instead, it reorganizes itself and returns in disguise. One of those forms is compulsive thinking. Imagine you are trying to decide on a relationship, a career, or a life direction. On the surface, it seems like a rational evaluation of options, but underneath, there may be conflicting forces. A desire for security versus a desire for freedom. A need for approval versus a need for authenticity. Fear of failure versus fear of regret. These forces do not negotiate cleanly. They pull in opposite directions, creating tension that is hard to resolve. Your conscious mind steps in. It tries to mediate the conflict through analysis. It weighs pros and cons, simulates outcomes, and replays scenarios. But because the conflict is rooted deeper than logic, no amount of reasoning can resolve it. The thinking persists. Not because you are weak. It is because you are caught between incompatible truths, the feedback loop of control. At the core is a powerful assumption. If I think enough, I can control the outcome. This belief is rarely explicit, yet it drives much of our mental activity. We analyze situations in the hope that clarity will give us certainty. We want certainty to grant us control. If we can predict every possibility, we hope to avoid pain, embarrassment, and loss. But reality does not cooperate with this strategy. The future remains uncertain. Other people remain unpredictable. Outcomes are beyond full control. So the mind escalates its efforts. It thinks harder and faster, more obsessively, trying to close a gap that cannot be closed. This creates a feedback loop. Uncertainty triggers anxiety. Anxiety triggers thinking. Thinking doesn't eliminate uncertainty. Failure increases anxiety. Anxiety triggers more thinking. And the loop tightens its hold, suffocating logic and hope. What you experience as overthinking is often this loop in motion, a system attempting to achieve the impossible. There is another layer to this trap, one that is even more difficult to see: your identity. You are not just thinking about problems, you are also thinking about yourself. Every decision shapes who you are, who you might become, and how you will be seen. Should you take that risk? It's not just about the outcome. It's about whether you are the kind of person who takes risks. Should you leave that situation? It's not just about comfort. It's about whether you are strong enough to walk away. Your thoughts twist themselves tightly around your sense of self. Suddenly, the stakes are excruciating. Every choice feels like an ordeal by fire. Every possibility a silent indictment pressed painfully against your heart. This is where the trap deepens. If thinking is tied to identity, then stopping the thinking feels dangerous. It feels like negligence or like abandoning responsibility for your own life. And so, you continue. You analyze, rehearse, and reconsider, not just to make the right choice. You also do it to protect your image as someone who cares enough to think carefully. The modern amplifier. While this pattern has always existed, modern life intensifies it. We live in an environment of constant comparison, endless options, and stimulation. Every decision is framed against a backdrop of alternatives, other careers, lifestyles, or versions of success. Social platforms expose you to curated lives. This creates the illusion that others have clarity and direction. Meanwhile, you are left with internal chaos. This contrast makes you believe your thinking is the problem, and that simplifying it will grant effortless clarity. But what you are seeing is not reality, it is a presentation. Behind every appearance of certainty lies a similar complexity, often hidden, often unspoken. The cost of the trap. Being trapped in thought is not a neutral state. It carries consequences. First, it fragments your attention. Your mind is elsewhere, revisiting the past, anticipating the future, and constructing hypothetical scenarios. The present becomes secondary. You pass through it rather than inhabit it. Second, it erodes your sense of agency. When every decision feels uncertain, you delay action, waiting for clarity that never fully arrives. In that time, opportunities pass. Third, it creates a raw emotional exhaustion. Thinking isn't just cognitive, it is emotional, visceral. Each mental loop tightens like a vice, and every unanswered question weighs like a silent, crushing burden. These relentless strains breed a deep and piercing fatigue. And perhaps most devastating, it poisons your relationship with yourself. You begin to see your own mind as a ruthless adversary, something to silence, control, or desperately escape. Self-trust erodes, leaving only the ache of betrayal from within. But your mind is not your enemy. The trap is. Seeing the trap. Clearly escaping this trap does not begin with stopping your thoughts. It begins with understanding them. What question am I trying to answer? What outcome am I trying to control? What fear am I trying to avoid? These questions shift your perspective. They move you from the surface content of your thoughts to the structure, the reason they persist. Often, you will find that the question has no definitive answer. The outcome cannot be fully controlled. The fear cannot be completely eliminated. This realization is not comforting, but it is clarifying, because it reveals the loop's futility, the limits of thought. There is a point at which thinking ceases to be useful. It is not because thinking is inherently flawed, but because it has boundaries. Thought can analyze, compare, and predict, but it cannot guarantee. It cannot eliminate uncertainty, resolve every internal conflict, or define your identity with precision. When you ask a thought to do these things, you are assigning it an impossible task. And when it fails, you blame yourself. This is the quiet injustice at the heart of the overthinking narrative. It frames a structural limitation as a personal deficiency, a different relationship with thought. If you are not overthinking and are indeed trapped, the solution is not to suppress thought, but to change your relationship with it. This begins with a simple shift. Recognize that not every thought requires engagement. You can observe thoughts without following them, notice questions without answering, and experience uncertainty without resolving it. This is not natural. The mind seeks closure and resolution. Letting a thought remain open feels uncomfortable, even irresponsible. This discomfort is not failure. It means you are stepping outside the loop. Action. Without certainty. One of the most powerful ways to loosen the trap is through action. Not action based on perfect clarity, but action despite uncertainty. This may seem counterintuitive. If thinking is meant to guide action, how can you act without resolving your thoughts? The answer lies in accepting that clarity often follows action, not the other way around. When you act, you generate new information. You test assumptions, encounter reality, and adjust your understanding. This breaks the cycle of internal simulation and replaces it with external feedback. You move from imagining outcomes to experiencing them, and with every trembling step forward, the loop's grip loosens. Gradually, you reclaim space for your breath. For the first time, hope flickers. Fragile, but yours. The paradox of freedom. There is a paradox at the heart of this process. The more you try to control your thoughts, the more constrained you feel. Certainty becomes increasingly elusive. When you accept the limits of thought and allow uncertainty, contradiction, and incompleteness, you create space. Space for action. Space for experience. Space for the clarity that stirs quietly in the heart, not forced, but quietly discovered. Freedom does not come from eliminating thought. It comes from no longer being governed by it. You are not overthinking, you are trapped. The idea that you are overthinking places the burden entirely on you. It suggests that your mind is excessive, that your patterns are flawed, that your struggle is self-created. But a deeper examination reveals something else. Your mind is responding to complexity, uncertainty, and internal conflict in the only way it knows how. It is attempting to protect you, to guide you, to make sense of a world that does not offer simple answers. The problem is not that you think too much. The problem is that you expect thinking to do more than it can. Breaking the narrative. When you shift from, "I am overthinking," to "I am caught in a loop," something changes. The blame softens. The struggle becomes more understandable. And most importantly, the solution becomes clearer. You don't need to silence your mind. You need to see its limits. You need to recognize when thinking serves you and when it circles something it cannot resolve. To step out of the loop, not by force, but by awareness. You are not overthinking. You are navigating tensions that do not have easy answers. You are confronting uncertainties that cannot be fully resolved. You are trying to use thought to achieve a level of control that reality does not permit. And in that effort, you have become trapped. But a trap is not permanent. It is a structure. And once you can see the structure clearly, you are no longer fully inside it. You may still think. You may still question. You may still feel the pull of the loop. But now there is distance. Now there is a choice. And that choice, small, quiet, often difficult, is the beginning of freedom.